The night before everything fell apart, I stood in my parents' house and tried to feel normal. It was the same house I grew up in, the white one with the narrow porch and the squeaky screen door that never closed right unless you lifted it a little with your foot. The front window still had those thin curtains my mother loved, and the hallway still smelled like lemon cleaner and warm dust. My parents lived in Portland, Oregon, in the United States, on a quiet street where the neighbors kept their lawns neat and their voices low. I had not been there in a while, and as soon as I stepped inside with my son, Noah, I felt that old pressure in my chest, like I had to prove I deserved to take up space. It was my parents' anniversary party, and my mother, Linda, had decided it needed to look perfect. She wore a silver dress and kept smoothing it down at the hips, like the fabric might betray her. My father, Richard, moved around the living room with a wide smile that looked practiced, shaking hands and clapping people on the shoulder. The table was full of food: baked chicken, salad with too much dressing, little rolls in a basket, and a cake that said forever in careful icing. Everyone kept saying the same thing: how lucky my parents were, how lovely the house looked, how family mattered more than anything, and I nodded along, even when the words felt like they were meant for someone else. My sister Megan arrived after me, and the room changed the moment she stepped in. She had a neat hairstyle and a bright laugh that pulled attention like a string. Her husband, Evan, followed her carrying a gift bag and acting like he was doing a favor just by showing up. Then came her in-laws, Diane and Harold, the couple my mother spoke about, as if their approval was a prize. Diane wore pearls and looked around the house the way people look at a restaurant before deciding if it's clean enough. Harold had a loud voice and a soft belly and a habit of talking over women, including my mother. When they greeted me, it was polite, but their eyes slid right past me, like I was part of the wall. Noah stayed close to my side for a while, then sat on the carpet with his toy cars. He was 5, and he understood more than people thought. Every so often he looked up at me, checking my face, and I would smile at him to keep him calm. I wanted him to feel safe, but I also wanted him to see me standing tall, even when my stomach was twisting. I had brought a small card with $40 inside because it was all I could afford. I wrote my parents a simple message about love and time and gratitude, and I told myself it was enough. Still, I felt embarrassed when I saw the gift bags Megan and Evan brought, thick tissue paper and shiny ribbons, like money didn't even bother them. The party moved around me like a river. People laughed, plates clinked, and someone played old music that made my mother sway in place. I helped in the kitchen because it gave me something to do with my hands. Linda thanked me, but her eyes were already searching for Diane's reaction, as if Diane's approval mattered more than my help. At one point, Diane mentioned how hard it must be for a child without a stable home, and she didn't say it directly to me, but she said it loud enough for me to hear. I kept my face calm and pretended to focus on folding napkins, but my throat burned. I told myself not to make trouble, not tonight, not in this house, not with my son watching. When the cake came out, Richard tapped his glass with a spoon and made a speech about family and loyalty. Everyone clapped and smiled. I clapped too, but my hands felt distant, like they belonged to a different woman. My mother leaned into my father and looked pleased, like this moment was proof she had succeeded. Megan stood beside Evan and looked like she fit into the picture perfectly, and Diane and Harold nodded with the kind of satisfaction people have when they think they've chosen the right side. I watched all of them and wondered where I was supposed to stand in that story, because in my heart, I felt like an extra, not a daughter. Later, when Noah started to yawn, I gathered our things and said goodbye. Linda kissed my cheek and told me to drive safe. Richard patted my shoulder and told me to call more often. Megan waved like we were friendly. Diane and Harold didn't even step forward. Outside, the air was cold and clean, and my car smelled like crackers and crayons. Noah fell asleep fast, his head tipping against the seatbelt, and I drove back to my apartment with a party still buzzing in my ears. I passed streetlights and quiet houses and thought about the rent due, the bills on my counter, and the way Diane's eyes had slid over me like I didn't matter. When I reached my building, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the parking lot and watched the dark windows. My rent was $1,200 and I didn't have it. My landlord had called twice that week and I had let it ring. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel and felt something inside me tighten, not like fear, but like a decision forming. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew this. The night of my parents' celebration had shown me how small they were willing to make me. And if I kept trying to fit into their version of family, I would keep shrinking until there was nothing left of me for Noah to hold on to. The morning after my parents' anniversary party, I woke up with the taste of icing and awkward smiles still stuck in my mind. Noah was curled up beside me, breathing softly, and for a few seconds I let myself pretend that the world was simple. Then my phone buzzed with a rent reminder, and the pretend feeling disappeared. I lay there staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to a car alarm somewhere outside, and I tried to add numbers in my head. The rent was still $1,200. My paycheck wouldn't cover it. The bills on the counter wouldn't wait. And my landlord, Mr. Dawson, was the kind of man who used polite words but meant threats. I got out of bed, made Noah cereal, and watched him eat like everything was normal. He swung his legs under the chair and told me about a dream where he rode a giant dog through a park. I smiled and asked questions because I didn't want him to see the panic behind my eyes. I had learned how to do that, how to keep my voice steady while my stomach churned. I washed the bowl, dried my hands on a towel, and looked at my wallet on the counter. I counted what I had: $18 in cash, a few coins, and a stack of ATM cards that felt heavier than they should. I sat down with my phone and opened my banking app. The screen showed my accounts in neat lines, like life could be sorted into boxes. I stared at the card numbers and the little buttons that said freeze and lock. My fingers hovered for a moment. It felt dramatic, like I was doing something illegal, even though it was my own money, my own access. I told myself I was protecting myself, protecting Noah, stopping the slow bleeding of fees and payments that always found me. One by one, I froze the cards. The app confirmed it with clean, quiet messages, and I felt a strange kind of calm. Not happiness. More like the calm you feel when you finally admit a storm is coming and stop pretending it won't. After that, I called Mr. Dawson. My voice sounded too cheerful, like it belonged to someone else. I told him I needed a little more time. He sighed, long and sharp, and said he'd already been patient. He reminded me that he had a mortgage too, as if his problems and mine lived on the same level. He said if I didn't pay by the end of the week, he would have to move forward. I knew what that meant. I said I understood, even though my throat tightened. When the call ended, I stared at the wall and realized I couldn't stay there and keep playing the same losing game. I packed slowly at first, then faster. I didn't pack like someone moving to a better place. I packed like someone escaping. I filled one suitcase with Noah's clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, his small jacket, and the stuffed bear he slept with every night. I put my own clothes in another bag, only what I could carry, only what I actually wore. I grabbed my laptop, my phone charger, and a folder of papers I had shoved in a drawer for months. I added a small box of photos, because I couldn't leave those behind. Everything else I left. The couch I bought secondhand. The dishes with chipped edges. The extra blankets I didn't even like. It felt cold to abandon it all, but it also felt honest, like I was finally admitting what I could and couldn't afford. Noah watched me with wide eyes. He asked if we were going to Grandma Linda's house again. I told him not yet. He asked if he was in trouble. I told him no, never. I told him we were going on a small trip just for a little while and that we were going to be okay. I said it like a promise, even though I didn't know how I would keep it. I pulled him close and kissed his hair, and he nodded like he trusted me more than he trusted the ground under his feet. I didn't leave a note for Mr. Dawson. I thought about it, but every sentence sounded weak or angry, and I didn't want to give him anything that made me feel smaller. I locked the door, walked down the stairs, and carried our bags to the car. The air was chilly and smelled like wet pavement. When I put Noah in his seat, he hummed to himself, calm in a way only children can be. I sat behind the wheel with my hands resting there, and for a moment, I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, like grief and relief were tangled together. Then I turned the key and drove. I didn't have a perfect plan. I had a direction and a small amount of money and a stubborn need to keep my son safe. I headed north toward Seattle, watching the city fade behind me in the rearview mirror. The streets I knew became roads I didn't. I stopped at a gas station and paid $30, choosing the smallest amount I thought would get me far enough. Noah asked for a snack, so I bought him chips and a juice for $6, and I pretended not to notice how quickly the dollars disappeared. That night, we stayed in a cheap motel outside Seattle. The room cost $79, and the carpet felt damp under my shoes. The blankets smelled like bleach, and the lights flickered when I turned them on. Noah jumped onto the bed and laughed, like it was a hotel in a storybook, and I let him laugh because his joy was the only soft thing in my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, listening to voices in the hallway and the hum of a vending machine. I had closed my cards. I had left without paying rent. I had crossed a line I didn't know how to uncross. Still, when Noah finally fell asleep with his bear tucked under his chin, I looked at his face and felt something steady settle inside me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew why I was doing it. I wasn't running because I was careless. I was running because I was tired of being trapped. And for the first time in a long time, even with fear sitting beside me like a shadow, I felt like I had chosen my own direction. A full month passed after that night in the motel, and my life looked different in ways I didn't expect. Noah and I were no longer moving from place to place. We had a small rental in Calgary, Canada, a ground floor unit with a narrow kitchen and one window that faced a row of trees. It wasn't a pretty house like my parents' place in Portland, but it was ours. The walls were plain, the floors creaked, and the heat worked only when it felt like it. Yet I loved it because it didn't come with smiles that hurt. I could breathe there without feeling watched. I kept my day simple. I worked at a bakery owned by a woman named Paula, and she paid me $16 an hour and let me take home day-old bread. Noah started school and came home talking about crayons and spelling tests and a boy named Leo who could run faster than anyone on the playground. At night, I counted money and wrote lists and tried to keep my face calm. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even stable all the time. But I was present and I was trying, and that mattered more than fancy parties. Then the bank found me again, the way a shadow finds you in the sun. One afternoon, my phone rang while I was wiping flour off my hands. A man named Mr. Collins spoke in a careful voice, like he was reading from a script. He told me my name was still linked to old paperwork I had signed back in Portland. He used words like responsibility and obligation, and I could hear the quiet threat underneath. He said if things went unpaid, it could fall on me, on the single mom who had to decide between $45 for groceries and $30 for gas. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I opened my laptop and looked at everything I had avoided for years. I pulled up statements, dates, and scanned documents. I found my own signature sitting at the bottom of pages I barely remembered signing. It hit me like a cold wave. I had trusted my parents when they said it was just to help. My mother, Linda, had promised it would be handled. My father, Richard, had said it was temporary. But the numbers were real, and the risk was real, and nobody was coming to protect me but me. So, I booked an appointment at a bank branch in Calgary. I wore my plain black coat, and I brought a folder of papers so thick it bent my bag strap. The bank office smelled like printer ink and hand soap. A woman named Janet met me in a small room with glass walls. She looked kind, but she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me what my options were and what could happen if I did nothing. Then she slid a document toward me, the kind that makes your stomach drop even when you know you need it. I read it slowly. line by line. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I wanted clean borders around my life. The document was meant to separate me from the mess, remove my name where it didn't belong, and stop the bank from treating me like a backup plan. My hand shook once, and I pressed my fingers into the table until it stopped. Then I signed. It was one signature, one pen, one quiet moment, but it felt like closing a heavy door. A week later, my father called. He didn't start with, "How are you?" He didn't ask about Noah. He went straight to anger, like he had been saving it.
"Do you know what you did?" he said.
His voice sounded tight, like he was holding his breath. I told him yes. I told him I knew exactly what I did. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just spoke the truth in a steady voice, because I was tired of acting like the truth was rude. After that, my mother texted me, and the words came out sharp and messy. She said I embarrassed them. She said Megan's husband, Evan, was furious. She said Megan's in-laws, Diane and Harold, were shocked and that I had ruined the family's image. I stared at the screen and felt something hard settle in my chest. They cared more about what those people thought than what happened to me. They cared more about looking perfect than about Noah having a safe home. I didn't feel proud, and I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear. They told me not to come, like I was something to hide. So I stopped being useful to them in secret while being unwanted in public. I chose my child. I chose my rent, my food, my small calm house in Calgary. And when I put my phone down, I looked at Noah sleeping in his little bed, and I knew this was the first time in years my name belonged to me.